All right, so America is known as land of the free, correct? When we think about that, obviously we're thinking about, there's no slavery here, that we know about, or loosely said. But of course, the question comes to mind a lot of times when we're watching, for example, when we're looking at, for example, what Justin just talked about, or what Amani just talked about, the huge advances in technology and just television as well. So the question to you is, we are the land of the free, but are our minds free? Now today I'm going to tell you why you shouldn't believe everything that you see or hear on television and the news. One example I wanted to bring up before I start discussing the topics and the problems I have at hand is I recently just changed my cable for my grandparents. My grandfather has become a little senile as he's progressed in age. The other day I was outside and he was just looking over the fences. And I didn't know where he was because he's having a hard time with his, going to the restroom sometimes. So I kind of had to watch out for him. I noticed he was outside peeking over the fence, and I was like, what is he doing? And so I go over there and I'm like, hey, what are you doing? And he's like, there's bears out here. There's bears. It's said it on the news and whatever. So I go back inside and I look at the television, and they're like, they're following the bears going along the streets and stuff like that, and they're covering it, but it's not the local news that he usually watches. It's like the national news, and they're just covering a couple of stories. It happened the day before. And this, obviously I understand why he didn't understand what was going on. He thought it was down the street or something. But I wanted to bring this up is because a lot of people, that's what they do. Even if they're not senile. They'll look at something on TV or on the internet or something like that, and then they'll be like, oh, this is the truth. This is everything, and this is exactly what I need to, without going into further investigation to solve the truth for themselves or even create their own opinion or their own ideas. Now today I wanted to cover a couple things, a couple strategies actually that the news uses to gain a lot of viewers, which is their main focus in all this, and as to why I'm telling you shouldn't believe everything you see or hear. Those are newsmaking, agenda setting, and interpreting. The first one I want to cover, of course, is newsmaking. Newsmaking is a strategy used by the news to tell you what's important, what you should be focusing on, regardless of how vast or big a topic may be. For example, I was watching, I think it was the ABC News as of recent, and they were covering how Obama was awarding the Medals of Honor and just handing all these medals out. He was giving them out to actors and scientists and philanthropists and just a bunch of important government officials as well, military included. And I noticed after watching it that they only really covered Ellen DeGeneres and Robert De Niro. And it was just ridiculous to me how they would do that when there are so many other people involved in being awarded. Now, the reason that they do that, of course, is because these people are relevant. Robert De Niro, Ellen DeGeneres, nobody is going to know about the scientist or the doctor that was awarded. They don't care about that. What they're caring about is the viewers. And that raises the question, and I'm asking you guys as well, are they really caring about informing us about what's going on and highlighting important things that are going on with the development of science and hospitals as well, or are they just trying to get your attention by showing you the fact that Robert De Niro was awarded and then following up with a 3 to 5 minute interview with him about his award? Moving on, I'm going to go to agenda setting, and agenda setting is another strategy the news uses to kind of correlate with the government. For example, the example that I want to use here was, I think it was on NBC. Before Trump was elected president, their stance on him was very negative. They would always, you'll see it the way that it's formatted as well. And it's super important as to how to get your attention. The I, of course, is going to be the first thing. So when they're telling a story of Trump before he got elected, you'll see them talking about something that he did, one of his numerous quotes, or Twitter, for example, you guys were talking about earlier, with things that he says. But the picture that they're painting on the news, of course, would show him screaming or yelling and have pictures of him with an angry face or something of that nature. Now, I look at the news now, and I watched it just recently, I think it was like yesterday, and they're like talking about Trump, and even if it's a negative thing now, what they're showing you on the screen is him waving and smiling and with his family. Now, the government funds, I think when I read on Politics in America, the book that I got most of this information on, is that the government funds at least 40-some% of most news broadcasts. And that's a huge amount. With that being said, of course the news is going to have an incentive to paint the picture of someone as important as the President of the United States in a positive light. Because of course that's where they're getting their funding from. That is a huge deal to them. And they want to stay on the good side so they can continue to be funded and possibly even rise to higher positions, etc. And I just thought it was just absolutely ridiculous how a news station's opinion, maybe not opinion of the person could change, but how they paint them on the news and how they present it to the viewers of America can change after just being elected. And that goes to show in not just at the presidential level, but government officials as well. You think of anything, you think of really school board, etc. And of course, segueing into the last one I wanted to cover was interpreting. So the way that I already kind of covered this already, but the way that they're going to show you something on the screen is a huge deal. Like I brought up earlier, the whole thing with Trump and how when they're telling you something, then there's a picture. That's what they're trying to get through your head first. And I think that it's wrong sometimes when they're covering a serious story. Like for example, there was a story about how this bus driver, as of recent, I think it was in Georgia, and he had problems before with the school board, and there was a lot of complaints of the children on the bus telling him how he was running stop signs and making sharp turns and offering just making threats and telling the kids disturbing things, and the fact that nobody did anything about it. And of course, this guy had previous psychological problems, and they covered different segments per night as more material unfolded and more evidence unfolded. And of course they would show the guy, and they showed only pictures of him in bad situations and things like that. And what he did was horrible. He actually ended up he crashed the bus on purpose and killed 5 or 6 kids. But the picture that they show, of course, is a very bad picture of him. He just looks like mean mugging and all that. But what I wanted to bring up with this as well is that there also are very good stories that the news tells, but they're still going to show a negative picture of someone. What if they put that negative picture in front of a good story? You're still gonna think that person is not the greatest person. And that's just one example as to what I can use to tell you how they encourage you to interpret things correctly. And of course, I just want to close by just asking you once again, the next time that you're getting up in the morning on the weekend, or maybe even before school, or you see that your parents are watching TV or the news while drinking their cup of coffee perhaps, I want to encourage you not to just believe everything that you're seeing and regurgitate it to your friends, and without actually taking into consideration what's actually going on. And ask yourself the question, we're the land of the free, but are our minds really free? And I think it's up for us to interpret the news for what it is, rather than just regurgitating what we see.
Matthew, some comments?
So I thought it was a pretty relevant topic. You had a good intro, gave the example of your grandfather. You asked that question, are we really free? Was that a good attention grabber? You had examples for each one of your points that you made. Although some of them could have been a little bit more, because I know there's more controversial examples that you could have given. You had a clear outline that you stated. There were citations for some of the things you said. Clear-ended, then you restated that question again. That you were pretty confident, clear, that your movements weren't awkward, they looked calculated, overall pretty good presentation.
Okay. I like the subject. I like the reference that you have at the beginning of the speech. Your point of view is pretty clear. I do think that you need to focus a little bit more on the preview. It sounds like kind of an informative speech. You're going to try to kind of analyze what it is that the news media does, and you know, there's a point at which you are going to say, you know, don't believe everything that you see, which I understand, but I think the argument needs to be a little bit more that we need to be aware about how we are being manipulated in some way, shape, or form. I thought you had some pretty good examples. You got one piece of information, though, that is just sticking out like a sore thumb that undermines your credibility. That 40% of news broadcast being funded by the government. That might be in some other country. That's not here, I can guarantee you that. So you definitely, if you're going to make a claim like that, make sure you have the specific quote and who you're attributing it to. This sounds to me like not just a paraphrase, but like a vague recall of something that you encountered someplace, and it's not accurate. So you got to be careful about that kind of thing. I thought the delivery was pretty solid. You do a good job speaking to people. You moderate your presentation and flow very smoothly. Like I said, I think you've got good illustrations to point out some things, and it makes it sound interesting and engaging. What the ultimate warning is and how important this is probably needs a little bit more development and argument, but you've got an idea here that I think is worth exploring. I'm just not sure that you got as much out of it as you could have. All right, thank you.